All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into the I Ching.
Okay.
And we're looking at a very specific hexagram today. We're looking at the 45th hexagram, which is called Cui.
Okay.
And Cui translates to gathering together or sometimes massing.
Right.
And so, for anyone listening who's maybe not familiar with the I Ching,
Sure.
it is an ancient Chinese text that's been used for divination and guidance for centuries and centuries and centuries.
Right, yeah.
And so Cui in particular is really fascinating because it gets into the dynamics of bringing things together.
Yeah.
So whether that's, people or resources or ideas, it's sort of like, how do we harness that energy for positive growth without letting it become chaotic or overwhelming?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the I Ching is all about understanding that flow of energy and change.
Right.
And Cui really dives into that, when we're trying to gather things together.
Right.
What are the dynamics that are at play there?
Yeah, and to really understand that we can look at the structure of the hexagram itself.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the two trigrams that make up Cui?
Sure. So the two trigrams in Cui are Dui on the top, which represents the lake,
Okay.
and Kun on the bottom, which represents the earth. And you can sort of visualize that, right?
Yeah.
You have this lake, which is teeming with life and energy and resources nestled within the earth.
Yeah.
So it really speaks to this process of gathering and nurturing.
Yeah. So it's not just about accumulating things, but it's about the way that they interact.
Right.
And kind of like how they support each other.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting, right? Because you have this interaction between the lake with its abundance and its flowing energy, and then the earth, which is providing stability and grounding.
Okay.
But it's this sort of careful balance, because too much water can flood the land.
Right.
Just as unchecked growth can lead to imbalance.
That makes me think about the community garden that you've been working on and bringing people together was obviously a key part of that. But I know there were also moments of tension and disagreement.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Cui reminds us that even with the best intentions, bringing people together always involves this kind of negotiation, navigating different personalities and different perspectives and different needs.
Yeah.
It's about finding that delicate balance between individual contributions and the collective good.
And speaking of remarkable individuals, we can't talk about Cui without mentioning this really cool imagery that comes up of the carp transforming into a dragon.
Absolutely.
Particularly in that first line of the hexagram.
Yeah.
And I think it really evokes this sense of ambition and transformation and, achieving great things.
Yeah, it's a really powerful metaphor for personal growth. It's about that potential that lies within each of us. Just like the carp, we all have that capacity to kind of evolve and reach these new heights.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the text actually mentions that when a carp transforms into a dragon, joy arrives, disputes and diseases cease, worries dissipate, fortune smiles upon us.
That's great.
So there's this really strong sense of optimism.
Yeah, there's this positive energy that's associated with this transformation. And the hexagram also mentions, it hints at overwhelming joy, acquired wealth, and the recognition of achievements.
So it sounds like things are looking pretty good overall.
Yeah. But there's always a but.
There's some cautions as well.
Right.
Even with all this positive imagery, Cui isn't all sunshine and rainbows.
Okay.
It does warn against potential financial disputes.
And that makes me think about some of the budget challenges you've mentioned facing with the community garden.
Right. It's like with abundance, comes responsibility.
You have to manage those resources very carefully to make sure that everybody benefits.
Right.
And to avoid those kinds of conflicts.
It's like, how do you make sure the garden flourishes without anyone feeling like their needs are being neglected?
Exactly.
Or that the fruits of their labor aren't being fairly distributed.
Right.
So Cui is all about that balance. And I think that's something that really resonates with what you're going through.
Absolutely. It's about fostering this sense of shared ownership and responsibility, even as we celebrate individual achievements.
And it's also interesting that the hexagram specifically mentions that it is beneficial to receive assistance from elders.
Yeah.
So in the context of your garden, maybe that means seeking guidance from experienced gardeners.
Yeah.
Or maybe, community leaders who have navigated similar challenges.
That's a great point. It's like we don't have to do this alone.
Right.
There are people who have been down this path before.
Right.
And we can learn from their experience.
Yeah. So we've talked about the symbolism of Ko.
Yeah.
We've talked about the potential for both, positive and negative outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the practical advice?
Yeah.
What kind of practical advice does it offer?
Well, one area where Ku gets surprisingly specific is in matters of love and health.
Okay, juicy. Let's get into that.
All right. So when it comes to love,
okay,
Ku is actually considered a very auspicious sign.
Uh-huh.
The text describes it as a pleasing and congratulatory auspicious sign.
Oh, wow.
So it suggests favorable conditions for harmonious relationships.
Okay.
And new connections.
So maybe that trip you're planning with your partner is going to be extra special?
It's possible.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense given this overall energy of Q, of, bringing people together in a joyful and supportive way.
Right.
However, when it comes to health,
okay,
the hexagram offers a slightly more cautious outlook.
Oh, all right. So let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
What specific warnings does it give?
Well, it mentions the possibility of severe illnesses.
Okay.
And it really emphasizes the need for swift action and treatment.
Okay.
It specifically highlights the chest, the abdomen, and the throat as areas of concern.
Interesting.
Suggesting that these might be vulnerable points during this time.
And it's especially interesting given that you mentioned that you've been feeling a little run down lately.
Yeah.
And you've had this persistent cough.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, Cui isn't meant to be a medical diagnosis.
Right.
But it does encourage us to be mindful of our well-being and to take those proactive steps to address any health concerns.
So it's like that little nudge to, listen to your body. And if something feels off, go seek medical advice.
Exactly.
Don't ignore those early warning signs.
Yeah. And I think this attention to detail, right? This focus on both the grand symbolism and the practical everyday concerns is what makes Cui so fascinating.
Yeah. And it even gets into really practical matters like lost items and legal disputes.
Yeah, it does.
It's like this ancient text has something to say about every aspect of our lives.
It really does.
So what does it say about lost items?
Well, it suggests that they're likely to be recovered.
Oh, that's reassuring.
Yeah.
Did you lose something?
I didn't personally lose anything, but it makes me wonder, about those mechanisms at play.
Yeah.
Is it about heightened awareness? Is it a stroke of luck?
Right.
Or is it something more symbolic about things coming back to us?
Right.
When the conditions are right?
Yeah, that's a good question to ponder.
Yeah.
And what about legal matters? Any advice there?
Yeah, it advises seeking resolution over confrontation and litigation.
Okay.
So it really emphasizes, finding those peaceful solutions.
Basically, try to settle things amicably before resorting to a full-blown legal battle.
Exactly.
Good advice for any era, really.
Absolutely. It's about diplomacy and compromise, even in those challenging situations.
Yeah, so, we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
We've talked about the symbolism, the potential pitfalls, the advice on love health, and even practical matters like lost items and litigation.
Right.
So it seems like Cui really does offer this holistic perspective on the complexities of gathering.
It really does. And as we go deeper into these specific lines of the hexagram, you'll see how these nuances just add even richer layers of meaning to this whole message.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we dive into that, I want to pause for a moment.
Sure.
And invite you, our listener, to reflect on what we've discussed so far.
Yeah.
What's resonating with you? What connections are you making to your own life?
Yeah, think about the areas where you're experiencing gathering, whether it's in your personal relationships, your career, even your personal growth journey. And how might the insights from Cui offer guidance or new perspectives on those situations?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Hold on to those thoughts, and we'll continue our exploration of Cui after a short break.
Sounds good. All right, so we're back, and we're ready to dive into those hexagram lines that we mentioned earlier.
Okay.
And remember, each line sort of adds another layer of meaning to the overall message of Cui.
Right.
Kind of like, you zoom in on a map.
Yeah.
And you start to see those smaller details.
Exactly. And they can be surprisingly relevant.
Right.
Even though these texts were written, thousands of years ago.
Right.
They still speak to us today.
So let's start with the first line.
Okay.
And it's interesting because it talks about having sincerity, but not seeing it through to the end.
Yeah.
And this ultimately creates chaos. And then finally gathering.
Right.
So it's like, you start a project with the best of intentions, but then maybe you hit some roadblocks or you lose momentum.
Yeah. It suggests that those initial steps towards gathering can be a little bit messy and unpredictable.
Right.
You might experience setbacks. You might encounter resistance.
Right.
But the key is to not give up on that initial vision.
And the line even mentions that if one cries out, a grasp turns to laughter.
Oh, wow.
So it's almost as if the I Ching is acknowledging that those initial challenges can actually lead to a sense of relief or even amusement once you push through them.
It makes me think about your experience starting the community garden. You face all those early hurdles with funding and getting people on board, but your commitment really led to this thriving space that brings joy to so many.
I love that connection. It's like those tears turned into laughter and a sense of accomplishment. All right, so moving on to the second line.
Okay.
The focus really shifts to the importance of leadership in the context of gathering.
Okay.
And it states that leading brings auspiciousness, and that sincerity is advantageous for offerings and sacrifices.
Okay.
So this line seems especially relevant to your role in the community garden.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not just about bringing people together,
right,
but it's about guiding them with integrity and purpose.
Exactly. The line suggests that a leader's genuine intentions and actions are essential for creating that harmonious and prosperous gathering.
And the mention of offerings and sacrifices makes me think that true leadership often involves putting the needs of the group ahead of your own.
Absolutely.
So all those hours that you've dedicated to organizing volunteers and securing resources and making sure that the garden is accessible to everyone. Your sincerity really shines through in those actions.
Well, thank you. And I think that sincerity resonates with others and it inspires them to contribute their own energy and efforts to that collective vision.
Yeah. All right. So the third line takes a bit of a turn. It talks about gathering as if sighing.
Oh.
So it implies the sense of frustration or a lack of clear direction.
Have you ever felt that way?
Oh, yeah.
In your work with the garden?
There were moments when, it felt like we were spinning our wheels and we weren't really sure how to address certain challenges or make progress towards our goals.
Yeah. And the line actually states that nothing's beneficial in this state. But I think it's important to remember that even these moments of stagnation, they serve a purpose.
It's like a pause, a time for reflection and reassessment.
Exactly.
And the line also mentions that there is no blame in moving forward, but some regret might linger.
So it's encouraging us to learn from those experiences and make adjustments.
Right. So even when things get tough, and even when that frustration creeps in, it's important to keep moving forward, keep seeking those solutions, and trust that eventually a new path will emerge.
I love that. And thankfully, the fourth line offers a little bit of reassurance.
Okay.
It simply states, great good fortune.
Okay.
There is no blame.
Oh, a moment of relief.
Yeah.
So after navigating all those challenges in the third line, it feels like there's this return to harmony and positive momentum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It suggests that when our actions are aligned with these principles of Cui, sincerity, integrity-wise management of resources, then good fortune naturally follows.
And then we come back to that fifth line that we discussed earlier, the one that emphasizes, the importance of integrity and genuine leadership, especially when you're in a position of authority.
Remember, it states gathering in a position of authority. There is no blame if sincerity is lacking. Great and enduring sincerity will lead to no regret.
So it's really a reminder that true leadership isn't about wielding power, but it's about using your influence to serve others, to guide that gathering towards a common goal that benefits everyone.
And it highlights the importance of long-term vision. That great and enduring sincerity suggests that true leadership is not about quick fixes.
Right.
It's about that sustained commitment to the well-being of the group.
Yeah, it's about building trust and fostering collaboration and making decisions that align with those core values, even when you're faced with difficult choices.
Absolutely.
Now, the sixth and final line mentions holding back tears.
Okay.
But it says there is no blame.
Interesting.
What's the significance of that?
Well, the sixth line often represents a culmination or a completion of a cycle. So in the context of Cui, it suggests that even the most successful gatherings eventually reach a point of transition or closure.
So it's like acknowledging that nothing lasts forever.
Right.
And there might be a sense of sadness or loss associated with that.
However, the absence of blame suggests that this is a natural part of the cycle.
Okay.
It's not a failure, but a completion.
Okay.
And those feelings of, bittersweetness are just part of the process.
Yeah, it makes me think about how your role in the community garden has evolved over time. You've poured so much of your heart and energy into it.
Yes.
There might come a time when you step back or pass the torch to a new leadership.
That's a really insightful connection.
Yeah.
And I think the sixth line reminds us that letting go is also part of that gathering process. It allows for new beginnings.
Right.
And new opportunities for gathering to emerge.
It's like acknowledging that the garden, like any living thing, will continue to grow and evolve, even as our individual roles within it change.
Exactly. And it brings us back to that cyclical nature of Cui, the ebb and flow of energy, the gathering and dispersing, the creation and completion.
Wow. We've really unpacked a lot here.
We have.
It's amazing how much wisdom and guidance can be found in these ancient lines.
It really is a testament to the enduring power of the Yi Jing.
Right.
Even though these texts were written centuries ago, the human experiences that they reflect are still so relevant.
Absolutely. So I know you're probably eager to see how all of this applies to your own life. To those specific challenges and decisions you're navigating.
Right.
So let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed.
Okay.
And then we can explore how these insights from Qi can offer some practical guidance and new perspectives on your own personal journey of gathering.
Sounds good.
So we've explored the symbolism of Qi. We've gone through, each line of the hexagram.
Yeah.
And now it's really about bringing those insights together and seeing how we can actually apply this to your own life.
Yeah. And I think what we've uncovered is this framework for understanding, how to bring things together, whether it's resources or people or ideas. And Cui suggests that, this gathering has incredible potential.
Right.
But it requires careful management. It requires sincere leadership.
Right.
And it requires this willingness to navigate both the triumphs and the challenges that inevitably arise.
It's like you've been saying, it's not just about accumulating things. It's about understanding that responsibility that comes with growth and abundance.
Exactly.
So how do we ensure that everyone benefits, and how do we avoid those potential pitfalls?
Right.
Like the financial disputes that Cui warns about.
And thinking about your community garden, it sounds like you've already intuitively grasped a lot of these principles. You've focused on building consensus and creating a shared vision.
Right.
And making sure that everyone feels valued and heard.
But like you mentioned, there have been those moments of friction.
Yeah.
Those times where you felt stuck or unsure of the best path forward. And that's where, that third line of Cui really resonates with me. The one about gathering as if sighing.
Yeah.
It's just this reminder that even with the best of intentions.
Yeah.
There are going to be times when the process feels challenging.
Exactly. And that's when it's so crucial to remember these other insights from Cui, the importance of, seeking guidance from those who have more experience.
Right.
The need for flexibility and adaptability.
Yeah.
And the power of perseverance.
Right.
Even when faced with setbacks.
Yeah, it's like that image of the carp transforming into a dragon. It's not an easy journey.
Right.
But through effort and determination, that transformation is possible.
Absolutely.
And speaking of transformations, you mentioned that you're at a crossroads with the community garden.
Yeah.
Considering stepping back from your leadership role.
And that's where I think the wisdom of that sixth line comes in. That bittersweet acceptance of endings and transitions.
Right.
It's acknowledging that things change. And sometimes letting go is necessary for new growth to occur.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that your efforts were in vain.
Right.
or that the garden won't continue to thrive.
Exactly.
It's just recognizing that your role might shift, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's about trusting that cyclical nature of things.
Right.
The ebb and flow of energy that Cui so beautifully illustrates.
So as you're thinking about your next steps, consider the principles that we've explored today.
Yeah.
How can you continue to foster that sense of shared purpose and responsibility, even as your involvement changes?
Right.
How can you make sure that the garden remains this source of nourishment and connection for the community?
And remember, even if you step back from a leadership position, you can still contribute your wisdom and experience in other ways.
Right.
Maybe you become a mentor to new gardeners, where you focus on documenting the garden's history.
Right.
Or you simply find joy in tending to your own little plot of land.
Yeah, the important thing is to stay connected to that source of meaning and purpose that the garden represents for you.
Absolutely.
And remember, Cui reminds us that even amidst challenges, there's always that potential for growth and transformation.
Right. Those turbulent waters, those moments of uncertainty are often the catalysts for the most remarkable achievements.
So as you navigate this transition, embrace that wisdom of Cui and trust that path ahead will unfold with grace and purpose.
It's been a pleasure joining you on this deep dive.
Yeah, this has been great.
And we hope that, the insights from Cui will resonate with you and offer guidance as you navigate your own journey of gathering.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic you are sure to find fascinating.
Absolutely.
Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep seeking those nuggets of knowledge that enrich your life and illuminate your path.
Beautiful.